Vicki Howell. Welcome to Ask Me Monday and the very last episode of 2019. And man, what a year it has been. With 27 episodes and near 500,000 views, we have been together every week almost, well, let's say 3 Mondays a month, for every month, talking, learning new skills, talking about how we're infusing creativity in our life, doing giveaways, chatting with each other in what I like to call the comment boards, which are our comment section, and just hanging out and hopefully making a little bit of positivity and putting it out into the world. So today what I thought would be fun is if we would take a look back at some of the best or most watched techniques, tips, and projects from episodes from over the course of the year. And the entire year has been brought to you by our friends over at Knitter's Pride, or Knit Pro if you're outside of North America. And we are so appreciative of that. And we would like to do a giveaway for all of you viewers. So I will be giving away a set of smart sticks with my with 2 balls of my brand new color Boho Bordeaux in Valley Wash, Super Bulky. And also a set of circular Knitter's Pride Zings with my new color, newish color, Castaway Coral in Valley Superwash Worsted. Both of these colors are colors from Pantone 2019, so it seemed like a good way to end the year. So make sure that you tune in or stay tuned in until the very end so you can get details on how to win. All right, without further ado, let's take a look at some of the most watched techniques of 2019. Okay, so I've already obviously worked a little bit of this, but when you start on a flat piece, you are going to begin with a knit row, which will be just a setup row. And then your first row, when you flip it over, you're already going to have bumps from, we're essentially working in garter stitch. And then the entire series is just 4 rows. So what we're going to be doing is just for this will be the first of the 4 rows. What we're going to do is we alternate multiples of, well, so you'll want an odd number if you're working flat, but you're working in a knit one B stitch. So it's the B that we need to talk about, right? All right, so I'm knitting the first stitch. And then the next stitch, the knit 1B, what that means is knit 1 below. So you see how there's a little hole from the stitch below? Now this looks like a little turtleneck because we're working in garter stitch, so you're not seeing the upside down raindrop, but you do still see the hole underneath there. That's where you want to go. You want to insert your needle, yarn over, and then knit the stitch as you normally would. And then you just let them both drop off. And what you can see that's done is see how that pulls up the fabric? It manipulates the fabric. And this is what's creating that really cool depth. It looks like there's like a honeycomb where it's a little deeper than the rest. It's also what's creating the strength, because you're getting 2 loops, the loop from if you would knit it normally and then the loop from the row below. So that's strengthening and thickening it. Okay, so I'm going to show you again. Then you would knit the next stitch, and then you do the K1B, which is inserting it through that stitch below, and so on and so on. And so you would just continue until you're at the end of your row. And I have another piece to show you. I'm switching yarns though. It's still the same thing. But I wanted you to see what this looks like in a more traditional yarn. So lush. Wouldn't this look great as a pillow as well? And again, I apologize for clanging on the marble. Okay, so we've worked all the way to the end. We ended with, so we did a knit 1, knit 1B all the way to the end. So we ended with a knit 1. I'm sorry, and I wasn't clear about this before. You're starting with an odd number when you're on a flat so that you end with the same stitch that you begin with. So we started with a knit 1 and we end with a knit 1. That's just so that you have a nice symmetrical piece for no other reason. So we flip it over, and because we are working in garter, we are going to get this yarn out of the way. We are going to knit that first stitch. Okay, now this is when the second sort of trippy thing that makes up the stitch pattern happens. So on the stitch that was the K1B from the row before, you will notice that you have this little, you have like a turtleneck and then a scarf around it, right? You want to take the scarf around it, take your right hand needle with the tip, you pull it up and place that stitch on, or that loop on your needle. Now you want to knit those two together. And that sort of replaces it. It makes it as it was before, sitting as it was before. Okay, so again, the next stitch is just a normal stitch, so knit one. The next one, we lift that extra strand. If any of you have ever worked in brioche stitch, you know how the brioche knit stitch is like the yarn over and the knit stitch. This reminds me of that just in the way that it looks. I don't know if that helps you, but there you go. Okay, so that's all you would do all the way across. Really, really easy. And that's creating the alternating sort of forward facing and then more of a deeper stitch next to it. Okay, I have another step out. I'm just having fun, so I'm just going to keep knitting for a second. And so that's all you need to know as far as the total stitch pattern. So I told you it was worked over 4 rows. I just showed you 2. The other 2 rows are worked exactly the same, only instead of starting with a knit 1 and then going to a K1B, you start with a K1B and then go to the knit 1. So you're just alternating it, and that's where you get that sort of the shape that we're talking about, sort of that honeycomb shape. So that's all that there are. That's all that there is to knitting it flat. Catherine's saying she loves the texture of the gold one. Thank you so much. This is my Moon Tower Mustard in Valley Yarns. I have a color collection with them on yarn.com. Okay, so that is flat. So let's talk about in the round. So in the round, which is how the basket project in Yarnier has worked, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, and this I'm doing this on all different size needles. These are actually the Knitter's Pride Zings, not the Gingers, because I ran out of cords because I'm using them for like 5 projects right now. So I switched over to this. But I wanted to show you that you could do it on any weight, and then you just find the corresponding needle to go with it. All right, so for the round, you need to do multiples of 2, so an even number. So the odd for flat, even for here. And again, I've written this all down at vickyhall.com along with the links to the supplies. And the knit 1B is done exactly the same on the round, in the round version. So all of the rows that would be the right side facing rows, if you were working flat, are worked exactly the same in the round. What is different now, because we're never working on that back, we can't work in garter stitch by just continuing to knit all the stitches. We have to work in purl stitches to create garter stitch in the round. So what that means is, instead of this being the wrong side, like we've worked that whole first row, K1, K1B, we're on the second round now, and we're at the beginning. So all of the stitches that were worked just as knit ones, we're going to pull the yarn over, and we are going to purl. We need those bumps to create that texture. Then this is where, and this is not the prettiest strand, I wish that looked prettier for you. Then this is where, and you can see it if you flip it on the back, this is where that little extra strand is. You are going to do the same thing. You're going to lift it up. I find it's easier in the round if you come back and scoop it up instead of from the front like you would if you were working the wrong side. You place it on your left-hand needle, and then you're going to purl them together. Then you purl the next one. Then you lift the strand from that K1B from the round below. Thank you to those of you, Penny, Noah, for sharing. I really appreciate that. Okay, and then you'll just do that all the way around. So everything else is exactly the same. All of the forward facing, the right sized rows are the same. The only thing that you need to know here is that you purl in the round, and then you do the purl 2 together of the strand and the stitch. And that's really all there is to it. It's really simple. But it just looks, I think it looks so beautiful, and it's really versatile. Here's kind of here's a closer up picture of, and you can also look at my Instagram feed. It's just at Vicki Howell to see even closer pictures. But I just think it looks so beautiful. And when it's combined with this t-shirt yarn, for a project like this that you really want to be sturdy, because I can also use this to, you know, organize my stash. I just decided I wanted it to go with the plant. The combination of having that thicker fiber, that heavier, you know, textile with this stitch really truly does transform knitting from, you know, kind of flowy to something being more structural. So that's really all there is to it. Okay, so no matter what size or weight yarn you're going to use, this is actually my color Manic Panic, also in a color collection for Valley Yarns at yarn.com, and it's a worsted. So I'm using a size 8, and these are the Knit and Purr needles. I've shown these before, but I'll just show you. It's this great set. Nobody does wooden needles like Knitter's Pride. They're really beautiful. And they come with a little bag, all kinds of cords. Really, really nice. Plus, I like that they're red because, you know, Valentine's Day, and you know how I am about a theme. But I digress. So again, there's no need to use circular needles. I just prefer them. All right, so you are going to cast on 20 stitches regardless of what weight yarn you use. And the pattern has been written out, and it's at VickiHowell.com. so that you can make along or just grab it after. Okay, so you're going to cast on, and halfway through, so after 10 stitches when you cast on, you're going to place a stitch marker. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be working in what's in a partial mitered square. So that means that you start with your amount of stitches that is an even number of stitches, and again, this is 20 for us. And then we're going to do a series of decreases. If we kept going until we didn't have any stitches left, it would create a square, a mitered square. We are only going to partially decrease, so it's more like a rectangle that's slightly rounded to create a heart. This will make so much more sense when I stop talking and start demoing, which I will do now. All right, so on row 1, you're going to knit. This heart is made with garter stitch, which just means we're knitting every row, which is also the reason that it looks really great if you use some yarns with a little texture. I'll pull in an example in a second. This is actually just a clean yarn that I'm using now, but I love garter stitch bumps with a little bit of textured yarn. Okay, so you are going to knit until you get to 2 stitches before the marker. Molly's asking where I got this stitch marker. I actually made this stitch marker, Molly. I am mixing my Valentine's, or my holidays here. I made red, white, and blue ones out of this vintage necklace from like the 70s, I think, that broke for 4th of July last year. So I'm just carrying it. It was red, so I thought it went with the theme. Okay, so we're gonna go to 2 stitches to right before the marker, and then we're going to do what's called an SSK, which is slip, slip, knit. And this is a left slanting decrease. So we're going to slip, we're slipping knitwise. 1, slip 2, and then we're going to knit them together through the back loop. Then we slip that marker. So we've done 1 decrease. We're decreasing all through the center. I'm going to pull in an example. Actually, you can see in the heart, all of the decreases are done right in the center. So that means that if we did a left slanting decrease right here, then we need to do a right slanting decrease to mirror it. And to do that, we just are going to knit 2 together. Okay, so now we've knit 2 together, and then from there, we will just knit till the end. So that is the row. You're going to repeat this row that I'm showing you right now, and then you're going to flip it around. So this is row 1. You're going to, and you can already see that those 2 decreases, you've decreased 2 stitches, are already creating what will be the point of the heart bottom. Then you'll flip it back. On the wrong side, all you'll do is knit straight. You don't need to do any more shaping. You're just going to knit straight. And you're going to repeat those 2 rows until you get to row 10. Now, again, I wrote it down the instructions at vickyhowell.com. I tell you when to switch colors and all of that good stuff, but you get the gist. All right, so I'm going to move that over, and then I'm going to bring in one that has worked all the way to row 10. Now, row 10 is a wrong side row, but you can see I've repeated. You can also see the scale. This is the exact same amount of stitches that I used for this one, but just with a considerably less bulky yarn. But that shows you the versatility. And I really like playing with scale. I often do it just by changing up yarns and needles. Okay, so we've done rows 1 through 9, which are just, as I said, repeating the right side row decreases. You're always going to work until 2 stitches before the marker, decrease, slip the marker, decrease the next 2 stitches, work to the end, and then work straight on the back, except for the last row. We're going to do a combination of shaping to give the heart a little bit of a rounded piece. Now, this really is going to be a little bit more like a mitered rectangle-ish, or a mitered V would be a better way to say it. A lot of what's going to give it that really cute roundness is the stuffing, but here's a little some subtle shaping that will also help. So we are on the wrong side. It's the last row. We're going to slip, slip, knit. So SSK, and then we are going to bind off all of the stitches till the last 2, just in the normal bind off method. Hi Maxine, hi Carla, so good to see everyone. I'm glad that you enjoy the pattern, Carla. Again, you can find it at vickyhowell.com along with some other suggestions for Valentine's Day. I actually did not put a regular marker on, I just tied some yarn around my pinky and left it there. So you're going to remove the marker and you keep going until you only have 2. Oh, Janet just suggested that this would be great for a large pillow for a better sofa. Adorable. You'd have to use some supersized yarn, but right now that's really on trend and you can even find them in craft stores. I like Plump & Co. Out of New Zealand. They have some beautiful yarn. Maybe I'll give that a try later. All right, so we've bound off to our last 2 stitches. You'll notice that there's also one more stitch on your right-hand side. You can ignore that for a second. Right now what we're going to do is we need to balance out the decrease that we did over on this side, which gave it just a slight curve, so that we can curve the opposite end to mirror it. So we're just going to knit those 2 together, and then you'll notice that you have your 2 stitches on your right hand needle, and you can just bind off from there. Stitch. So for this stitch, you'll just chain whatever amount that you want. I chained 14, and again, the patterns are all written out at vickyhowell.com. And you would just single crochet in the second stitch and all the way across like you normally would if you were working plain old single crochet. Okay, this is where it's different. So I've worked that one row, looks like this. And again, I'm using really thick yarn, and this is a Knitter's Pride Dreams hook. Now for this stitch, I absolutely recommend going up. I would say go up 2 sizes, but you know, crochet is so subjective on gauge that you kind of just have to check it out for yourself. All right, so we chain 1 as we normally would. Now, normally what we would do for regular single crochet is we would turn the piece around like this. You can still do this for this stitch, but I find that it's easier if you work along the back side of the piece. So this chain 1 for this particular swatch is going to count as your first single crochet. Now, you're going to insert the hook in the next stitch, but only in the back loop. So that's this one. This is why I like these dream hooks, because they're really pointy and it makes this part so much easier. Then you are also going to insert it through the chain from that first row below. So now you're going to have 3 loops on your stitch. You're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. So what you're doing is you're single crocheting, but you're single crocheting those 2 loops together. For the, I see a question from Kim, what kind of yarn this is. This is Super Valley. I'm sorry, this is Valley Yarn Super Bulky Super Wash, and this is in one of my colors with my color collection. Okay, so you are all you're doing is you're going through the back loop. So normally we would go under both loops, correct? For a single crochet. Through the back loop only, and we're also catching the parallel bar, which was the chain from the row below, also. And we're single crocheting them together. And what that is doing, why that's creating such a thick fabric, is it's really sort of creating kind of a tube. So it's folding the material, the fabric over. Now, that also means this stitch does take a long time before you see any real results, because you're only going up about a half of a stitch's height each time. Okay, so you would just continue that all the way to the end and then turn as normal. But I want to show you what it looks like after you work a bit of it. Look how thick this is. Look at that. It's like a thick old piece of bread. This is, you can see how there's not a lot of drape. I normally would use a L hook, and I'm using a 12 millimeter, and it's still pretty taut. This would be a great stitch for a hot pad. If you wanted it for a garment, I would go up an even bigger hook. But look at the girth of this stitch pattern. It is so thick and cozy. Okay, so I want to show you how you'll work the rows after you've gotten past that initial chain. So I finished, and this is what the end of this row looked like, and you can see there's a little tiny bit of a step. We're going to chain one, and again, that first stitch counts as the first single crochet. So now we are going to continue. We're going to work in the back loops always for the stitch, so that's this one. And then we work in the unworked loop, so it'll be the closest parallel bar that you see from the row below. So technically that would be the front loop, but it gets confusing if you think of it that way. So I just go to I think it does, to the nearest parallel bar. And you single crochet them together. And once again, we are crocheting the thermal stitch, the warmest crochet stitch in the land. And again, this is why I like this really pointy hook, this Knitter's Pride Dreams, because you really have to get under there. So technically, right now, if we were working traditional single crochet, we would be holding the piece like this. You absolutely could work it like that, but it would require kind of going back and forth like this. So I really think, at least while the piece is manageable enough to hold, that it works better to just kind of work on the back side of your work. And you would just continue that all the way to the end. That's all there is to it. And you can work this stitch. This is single crochet, but this same method will work with the other height stitches. So I encourage you to experiment with it. It would be a really heavy garment, so go up several hook sizes if you're going to attempt that. I really think it would be better for a rug, for a trivet, or possibly for a very warm blanket. And that is, you know what, I'm at the end. So actually I want to show you, because the end, as always in single crochet, finding that last stitch, I always recommend that you count your stitches at the end of every row. But it can be a little fussy finding, so you're going to kind of just jab it in and see where, let's see where the closest little parallel bump is. And it looks like it's there. Again, I'm really glad I have a pointy hook. And that is the very last one. And that is the repeat row. So you would just repeat that row that I just showed you for as long as you'd want the piece. And you can really see here how the height of the stitch is only the height of half a stitch because of the way it worked. Alrighty. So that is number 2 of our top 3 warmest knit and crochet stitches. This next one, I'm going to show you the last step first for a second, just so you can see what we're doing. And then the next thing that I'm going to be showing you is how to double knit using 2 colors. So let's get started. Now the first thing, this one I actually want to show you the cast on for. You can absolutely cast on. There's multiple ways to do it. If you would like your bottom your bottom edge to be all one color, you can cast on in one color, then join the other later. There's also a fancy cast on message that you can absolutely Google. I like the look of, I'll show you what we're going to be doing, the braided double color cast on. And it's really easy if you know how to do the long tail cast on. So for double knitting with 2 colors, you're going to create a tail, but unlike with traditional long tail cast on, you don't need to worry about how long it is for how many stitches, and I'll show you why in a second. Just enough that you can weave it in later. All right, so now I've moved on to, I'm working with my marbles DPNs. I mentioned at the beginning of this video how one of the techniques you needed to use either circulars or double pointed needles. This is the one, and I will show you why in a second. I have several step outs for this one, so I'll be switching back and forth on circulars and double pointed needles just so you can see the difference. There's not really any, but just so you have a way to think about it. Okay, so you want to you want to tie a slip knot and place it on your needle. Now, your first color here is going to be your color B. Your second color is color A. I know that's confusing, but it'll make sense in a second. So all that you want to do is these will also count as your first 2 stitches. So we just have, so this is my Moon Tower Mustard, and this is Superwash. This is also Valley Yarn Superwash, but this is worsted. And this is their pink, and I think it's just called pink, but forgive me if I don't know the name. All right, so we are going to go ahead and hold our yarn how we always would if we were doing a long tail cast on. So that means separate the two strands. Now this is why it doesn't matter what the length of the tail is, because we're actually not using the tail to cast on. We're using the 2 balls of yarn. Now, whatever color yarn is in your pointer finger is the color of the loop that is going to go onto the needle. So I always remember it by thinking, point me in the right direction. All right. So since I have a pink loop for my last stitch, I know that I want gold next. Or mustard. So I'm going to go ahead and sweep through like I normally would under the pink and grab that gold. And that's my next stitch. Okay. But now I want a pink stitch because I'm alternating. So that means I need to swap them. So I just cross them, reset up, and do the exact same thing, but with the opposite color. So I go under the gold and I grab that pink. All right, now I want to switch again. So I'm going to cross it again. And I'm going to grab the gold. And what this is doing is I'm intentionally crossing the bottom so that I get kind of a braided look while also alternating colors. All right, so you're just going to do this for as many stitches as you'd like to cast on. You need a lot of stitches when you're working in this pattern because you're creating 2 pieces of fabric at once. For the swatch that I have at VickiHowell.com, I believe I said 24, but it doesn't really matter as long as it is a multiple of 2. Okay, so these were the Dreams double pointed needle, or marbles, excuse me, Knitter's Pride marbles. Okay, so after you this is the first step. You know what? I'm sorry, I'm incorrect. I was going to use this as my next step out. Okay, so after you've gotten all your stitches cast on, you're going to flip it over. And now you'll see what I said at the very beginning earlier, or not the very beginning, but of this particular tutorial, was that your first color was going to be color B and your second color is color A. That's because you ended with color A, so when you flip it over and you're at the beginning of your round, your A is set up and ready to go. All right, so you'll see that you have 2 strands hanging. From this point on, you'll never work with 2 colors at the same time again. You'll only work with one color per round. And what you're doing is this is the reason that we need these double pointed needles or a circular needle. You're actually going to work each row twice-ish because you're going to be working the knit row of one side and then working the purl row of the opposite side. Well, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so the first thing that we do on row 1 is we are going to, with color A, which is the pink, knit 1. Then we're going to slip the next stitch, the gold stitch, because we always slip the stitches of the color that's not our working yarn, but we are going to do that with our yarn in front. So like this. Then we put the yarn back in its place and we knit the next one, put it in front, slip it, and so on and so on. Now the reason that we're moving the yarn in front is because on this side, if we were working a knit 1, purl 1 rib, which is essentially what we're doing, what would come after the knit stitch would be the purl stitch, right? So there would be a bar of fabric in front of there. So that's what this yarn around the stitch is mocking. All right, so you would just do that all the way to the end. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move to the other stuff out, even though I could use that. All right, so now, and these look so dark, but they're actually blue. All right, so now what you've got is you've got your needle. Let me just stop and show you that cast on again. Look at how pretty that cast on is. It looks like a braid. It's intentionally twisted. All right, so we've worked row 1. So we knitted all of them with the pink, slipping all our gold stitches. But now you'll notice that you've got your pink working yarn over here, but you still have the mustard all the way over here. So if you flipped it around, it still wouldn't be correct. So what we need to do for row 2 is slide the stitches back. So you always know that if you have a long strand, not the tails, but a long strand on either side, that you have to slide to start again. All right, so you slide to the opposite. And then from here, we'll be working with B. And this is not necessarily set up correctly. You know what? This step out is not set up correctly. I apologize, so let me go back to this one. All right, slide over and let's work with B. Oh, live video, I just love it. Okay, ready? So we are going to now start by slipping this first stitch because we're not working with the pink, but this time we want to slip with the yarn in back because what we're going to be doing next is work a purl stitch. So this would have been mocking our knit stitch. So we purl the next stitch with B, move the yarn back again, slip the next stitch. Just realize I'm working with 2 different needles, but they're the same size, so it won't matter. Purl the next stitch, yarn in back, slip. So just remember, you only work the stitches of the color that your working yarn is, and you slide, or slip rather, all of the stitches that are not in your working color. All right, let's get this out of the way. So that was row 2. Now at this point, finally, you will have both of your working yarns on the same side, so you now may turn. All right, you may have noticed that I moved over to a circular needle. I just wanted to show you how it would work on this. This is also from the Ginger's interchangeable set. It does not matter what length because we are not working in the round. You just need to be able to slide the stitches. Okay, so now it is time to work with our color A again, which is our pink. So we want to slide the gold with the yarn in back because this would be a knit side for the gold, or the mustard rather. And then you're going to purl the next one. All right, so we're going to slip rather, purl the next one. Let's get this out of the way. So we're going to slip the gold,
Purl. So essentially we're repeating row 2, we're just doing it with a different color. And you just do that all the way to the end. You get the idea. All right. So then you will be in a place, and now I'm going to bring the big one back, where your yarn is at opposite sides. So this is the big one. Now I also wanted to show you what's happening is you're creating 2 different pieces of fabric. Isn't that neat? So, and I also want to talk to you about carrying up. I want to show you what happens if you do not twist on the side, which you could actually intentionally do this and create a pocket. That might be really cool for a water bottle. But I'll show you how the proper way to do it. I'll have to show you when I get to the other end is to wrap the yarn along the side. All right, so this is a big mushy gushy one, super warm. And this is the last row of the row repeat. So now we have B, our A is on the opposite side. So I would have ended here. I would slide my work down to the opposite side. Now I've got my B. I want to knit the first stitch, and then I want to move the yarn in front and slip the other stitch, the pink stitch. So again, it might seem like a lot, but really, whoops, and this is what can happen when you're not paying attention. If you ever see that you have 2 colors in a row, 2 of the same color in a row, you know that you need to undo it and go back, because you only want to knit or purl the stitches, so work the stitch that is attached to your working ball of yarn. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish this row just so I can show you what I meant about the sides. I meant to do that earlier, so make sure I get to do that. Oh, it looks like we've got Murthy watching from Cumberland, Ontario. Nice to see you. And Sheila's watching us. Great seeing you again, Sheila. There's something super satisfying about creating 2 pieces of fabric at the same time, especially on this thick yarn. Okay, so, oops, there's one more stitch I didn't see. All right, so that's the end. That's the 4-stitch pattern, this 4-row stitch pattern. And you would just continue those 4 rows. Oh, Belinda from Northern Ireland, so happy to have you here. Welcome. So that is what you would repeat until the piece is as big as you'd like. This would be great for a sweater, for a hat, for a scarf, anything that you wanted to be reversible. Look at how cool the braided edging looks if you're into that. I just wanted to make one more point before I flip the camera around, because that is it for double knitting. What you want to do is you want to make sure that whatever your working color would be, and we would be starting row 1 again, so it would be A. You want to make sure that you take it and you put it under what the opposite color is. And what that's going to do is lock it in place so that you don't have the openings like we did on the other side where I hadn't done it. So you want to make sure that that fabric gets wound together. And so to do that, whichever, I'm just going to say it one more time, whatever your working yarn is, you bring it under the yarn that's on hold so that it locks it into place. And that, my friends, is all for that. I'm going to flip the camera. Okay, so you can see here, this join is, I say clean, you can still clearly see where it's joined, but it's smoother. All right, and so this is how I made this entire ball using this method. So the cool thing about this is I didn't worry at all if the strips were the same. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to use these 2. Okay, so this is what I call the looping method. You're going to fold a tab over. So I have right side showing. And then you just do a little snip. It really doesn't matter how big the snip is. You just want to make sure you don't go too close to the edge of the fabric because you don't want it to tear through. Then you repeat the process on a second strip. I will have closer up pictures of this method at VickiHowell.com shortly after this video. Then you have 2 strips, and they both have a little, it looks like a buttonhole, little slits. Then you are going to take the top strip and feed it. You can either hold it this way or this way, whatever makes you happy, but you want to feed the top through the slit. Then you want to still work with your top piece. You want to whip it around and feed that top piece through itself. And pull it all the way through. And it'll look like this. Give it a little tug, smooth it down, and they're joined. Isn't that cool? Okay, so now I've got I'm going to show you again. I've got my ball over here. I'm going to add this. This strip is way bigger than what I was doing before, but we'll make it work. So even if you're working with a really narrow strip like this one, it still works. Just a note here, I usually get rid of the selvage edge, which is the edge that you find on the side of a fabric that usually is undyed. So I'm cutting my snip. Hi Taylor, nice to see you. The important part is that you make the working, let's call it the working strip, the one that is going to get flipped and fed through itself, not the one that's attached to your ball. It's not dire if not, well, yes it is. You can't, because you can't fit your whole ball through this slit. So you have to work with the piece that is not attached. So just remember, you're always working with the piece that's on top the whole time. So we push the top piece through the bottom piece. So we can see the slit on that top piece. Then we take our top piece again, wrap it around and feed it through itself. Give it a tug. Smooth it out, and that's all there is to it. And you can just do that for as much fabric as you have or as long as you want to make the strand. What we're using our neck or your pin to help with tension. This also takes a lot of the onus off of completely of your hands, and it allows for a much more consistent gauge between knitting and purling. Patty's actually the one that told me that it's really hard to get a consistent gauge with your purl stitch that you get with a knit stitch because of the different way you manipulate the yarn in English and continental methods. So this way, since it's very similar, it's easier to get gauge. Okay, so then you're going to take the working strand and you're going to just put it over your middle finger. Choose a finger. This is the one that that I have chosen, and also the one that Andrea Long recommends. And this again is just to give you a little room for tension. Okay, so this is the point where I'm going to flip around the camera so that you can actually see the stitching. I just wanted you to see the setup. Okay, so now let's talk purling. So it has been said that users of the Portuguese purl actually prefer purling over knitting, which is the exact opposite of most stitchers who use either the English or continental method. And I'll show you why that is. So again, we're going to enter the same way. And this way, for the purl, you don't have to actually change the orientation of the needles at all. You're going to purl. You use your thumb again to flick it down and scoop that stitch. So the only movement, and as you get better and faster at it, all that you'll see is this. So insert, scoop, and up. Insert, scoop, up. And you can adjust the tension as you need to adjust it. Insert, scoop, and off. And that really is it. I actually quite enjoy purling this method. If I'm being honest, I can say I might like stick to my regular throw method of knitting, which I prefer, and purl this way. And that's actually, I think, what Patty was saying about if you do that, you'll be more likely to get a consistent gauge for that other knit stitch than you would necessarily here. So you can see, if you do it right, you're barely needing to maneuver your fingers and hands at all. There's just a little bit of this action, which makes sense that it would be a lot easier on your fingers. So if you're having a little bit of tenderness or pain, this might be a good option for you.
Well, there you have it. From Portuguese purling to making fabric yarn to the warmest stitches to knit and crochet, we have covered a bunch this year. And I'm so looking forward to being back in 2020 for even more creativity and how-to goodness. So let's talk about that. So at the beginning of this episode, I showed you our 2 giveaways. And now I'm going to tell you how to win them. So to enter to win, what I would love you to do is to comment in the section below with what you would like to see for 2020. Knitting techniques, crochet techniques, and I'm even considering, it's been a couple years since I've really done this, but I'm considering adding a day for other crafts. I do everything. I love to sew, embroider. Now I'm into Bargello because of my friend Brett Barra. Any sort of like regular crafting, you know, journaling, whatever it is. If it's creative, I probably love to do it. So if you're interested in that, please let me know, and also let me know what you would like to see. So again, all you need to do is in the comment section, tell me what knit, crochet, or other craft techniques that you would like me to cover in 2020. And also if you would like me to bring in something like a community corkboard segment where I just feature one of you by giving you a shout out every episode. And maybe it's a business, maybe it's a new project you're working on, maybe it's a charity, or really anything else. I want to do what you're interested in for 2020. So you need to do that this week, and I will announce the winners, the 2 winners, during our first episode of 2020, which is at noon Central Time on January 6th. Now, if you are a crocheter and not a knitter, just make sure that you add that too, and I will swap out a Knitter's Pride needle for hooks for what we've got. We'll get it figured out for you. We got you covered. All right, so make sure that you do that, and I will be back here with the winners on the 6th. But you will see me before that. You know, I have my subscription box, Yarn Yay, and I'm so excited about 2020. I've already got the first, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months, at least the yarn picked out, the good part. And I am dying to show you what we have planned for January. So on January 3rd, here on Facebook, then later on YouTube, actually I might debut them at the same time. At noon, I will be unboxing January Yarn Yay. So for more information on Yarn Yay in general, you can go to yarnyay.com. Otherwise, please check out all of the patterns and the techniques and the full episodes that were featured in this episode at vickyhowell.com. And if you're interested in more, I actually listed the top 10 episodes so that you can deep dive into really the majority of the goodness that, not the majority, that's not fair, a good portion of the goodness that we covered in 2019. Have a wonderful New Year's Eve, be safe, and I am so looking forward to being creative with you in 2020. Bye.